A privilege to have you all here. We understand the amount of dedication, knowledge and expertise that you bring to our campus. So thank you once again. We should specially thank Ministry of Culture for having given us this opportunity. This is a great initiative and we are ever grateful to them for their sponsorship and support. I will now request Professor Raghunath Tirupati, our director in charge, to accord a floral welcome to the dignitaries here. I will now request Professor Raghunath Tirupati, our director, to actually give us the welcome address and the keynote. Professor Tirupati is a very distinguished scholar. He graduated from IIM Calcutta and then completed his PhD at Sloan School at MIT. He has several research publications which have been very heavily cited in his field. He's a very acclaimed scholar, won several research awards, as well as he has been recognized for his academic accomplishments.
So first, I would like to kind of welcome you all. Mr. Ravindra Singh, Professor Padaki, Professor Chatterjee, and the distinguished delegates here to our campus for this inaugural conclave on arts management. I think as Professor Raghunath mentioned just now, this is a wonderful opportunity for us, and it gives us to widen our portfolio of programs and courses and other activities we have on campus. We are proud, and actually we mention it whenever there is a chance, particularly for foreign visitors, that we are not a business school, focusing only on commercial, for-profit sectors of the economy, but we see our role as management school with much broader mandate, which includes public sector, government, and other non-traditional areas, which includes arts and so on and so forth. And so, to my mind, this opportunity gives us to go one step further in that direction.
I'm very happy to be here today because actually arts management is like, I think, the elephant, and I was very much like the blind man. And when I joined the Ministry of Culture, there was a report that we should have arts management in the country. And one of the recommendations was that we should set up an all India cadre. So, you know, it was a very sort of cliched, or I would say knee-jerk response that if you have an all India cadre, then you will be able to create management in culture. So and just after that, I think I had met Professor Padaki, and he had suggested that he was interested in this sector, and I think he took a lot of initiative in this regard and was really the driving force initially behind the idea of this conclave. And I'd also like to thank Venu, who was then the Joint Secretary in the Ministry handling this subject, who took it forward. And then, of course, IIM, which provides the sustenance and the support and the venue and all the help that is required for such a conclave. And then all of you who are here today, who have come together to, with your passion and interest in the sector, to give I think, more truth to get and to give it to this vision. And I am grateful to all of you that you are here today, and I am sure that we'll have a very productive session in this regard. Actually, the idea of culture is something that is recognized globally, that, you know, this sort of separation between culture and science is not really working, and I think among the first who sort of articulated it very clearly were the Koreans, who realized that though they had all these engineers and graduates, they said we are losing out because we have lost our creativity. And so again, they sort of forcibly tried to introduce culture into the school syllabus, that, you know, that is the solution, that you sensitize children to culture, and the creativity will come, and so on and so forth. But I don't know how much that has really worked. And then the extreme is Scotland, which has this Creative Scotland program, in which they are trying to integrate culture right from the time a child is born. And so, you know, so someone comes over to your house the moment a child is born and tries to inculcate how you integrate culture right from childhood into a child's life, and then in school and so on. And as you grow earlier, and of course the lottery and now the oil wealth of Scotland funds that kind of program. So the issue is that really in India, despite whatever everyone else is saying, culture is really living and vibrant in India. And despite lack of, what are traditional methods of support which are viewed worldwide, I think we are the sole, it's almost a unipolar world as far as culture is concerned. It's India versus maybe the whole of Europe combined or somebody. But the diversity, the richness, the living traditions, that you find only in India. And we only realize this when you go abroad, the kind of respect that you get for India as a sort of cultural superpower. And the diversity which we have to offer. And much of the world, it has been killed or it has languished. But here it is still living. So the issue is that how do we integrate management into this process without killing culture itself? Because the counter view is that you need to really have management when you are flourishing in culture as it is, without a sort of formal government or other intervention. So I think this is the debate which we have here before us today. But one major issue I think which we need to look at is how do we de-license culture in India today, because it is a heavily licensed sector, whether you look at ASI, whether you look at museums, whether you look at even, I would say, performing arts. So how, and there is still a disjunct, as it were, between what is considered as the classical arts and the folk arts, and the recognition is almost like a caste system being replicated even within culture. So how do we break these barriers? How do we integrate culture? And how do we network people who are interested in this sector? And I'm very happy that the paper which has been circulated by Professor Padaki and Professor Chatterjee also highlights the need of networking. And I just like to pick on one sector, which is the museum sector in India, and I know Venu has been involved, and even my predecessors laid the seeds of that program, which was first to start on focusing on people, and you had programs led by the Chicago Art Institute and British Museum, which focused on people. But that is not sufficient. You also need to undertake structural reform. There's a lack of manpower. Even the National Museum Institute is near defunct. So all those programs, I find that, that is one sector which has been addressed for the last 3-4 years, in which you're training people, you're trying to generate resources also by setting up museum institutes, and where you'll get that kind of art manager or the art expert. Plus, you're also looking at physical infrastructure, because I know, for example, Ministry of Culture gave 100 crores to the Indian Museum in Calcutta. It's recently given, I think, 30-40 crores to the Victoria Memorial in Calcutta. I think the National Museum Institute has also got getting a grant of 30-40 crores. The NGMA in Calcutta again is planning to shift into the Mint building. So physical infrastructure is also important. Sometimes from the management side, I find we over-focus on people and saying that if people come, that is sufficient. But I think resources are also an issue, which we have addressed in the museum sector. And recently we tried to have what was a museum alliance, in the sense we called a meeting in Delhi of both private and public sector museums and said that we should have an alliance where you have a group which does advocacy for the sector, because there are issues which, cut across the board for all museums, which are like import of objects, export of objects, antiquities and so on and so forth. But that has not been very successful from what I could make out. It's still a sort of government-led initiative. There's no sort of, from below that they really feel that anything can come of it. So these are the problems which we are facing in the sector. I just thought I'd share them with you. And I'm sure that NCRT is there. I'm told that UGC is not here, but NCRT is here today. But we would also need to involve them in future in these ideas and how to make them a reality. And from Ministry of Culture side, I would like to assure you that we'll be very proactive and would ensure that whatever comes here today, we'll have it taken very seriously at all the requisite levels. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and particular thanks to our colleagues from the IIM Bangalore for making this opportunity possible, and Vijay for all the hard work that he has put in. I think this is really, for me, in a sense, the fulfillment of a bit of a dream, because just the other day, talking to somebody who I respect a great deal about this meeting, the person turned around to me and said, one thing you should remember before you go to Bangalore is that culture cannot be managed. But I think all of us have faced this issue, that what do we mean by culture first? What do we mean by art? There are these terms that we're going to be using over the next couple of days are themselves difficult often to comprehend. And what exactly is the management challenge here? I look back at a document that's way back there, which Kulbhushan and Jain and I were involved with, which goes back to 1976-77, when really a seminal experiment took place in Fatehpur Sikri to protect Sikri. And although we never used the term art or cultural management then, that really became the challenge. What happened at that time was that a young architect who was living in London, Satish Davar, obsessed with Fatehpur Sikri and its message to the world, was terrified at the decline of the environment. And he found a sympathetic ear in a woman called Anjani Mehta, who was at the Ministry of Tourism. And Anjani and I had worked together when I was in the ITDC, and then I moved across to NID. But what Anjani understood, talking to Satish Davar, was that here was a location and a monument that was much more than a collection of old stones. There was a cultural ecology there, which was also affected by over 32 different authorities, of which tourism was one, but there was no way to manage this challenge. What she suggested, therefore, was that NID as an interdisciplinary teaching institution, looking at tourism as a sector of national development where design had a role, should provide an umbrella for bringing authorities together to do this integrated area development plan. It was a huge education for us. At the end of the day, it was never really implemented the way it should have been, in an integrated way, because once again, there was no authority with that kind of capable of managing the synergy that was needed there. And whatever happened in the integrated area development plan, which Kulbhushan and other colleagues developed, Satish Davar, unfortunately, dropped dead on a London street just before the project got started. And we were very fortunate that Kulbhushan Jain then walked in and helped us to continue this. But the problem then was management. Neither the Ministry of Tourism nor clearly the National Institute of Design, coming under the Ministry of Industry, were in the position to actually manage this. And after the experiment that took place in Fatehpur Sikri, of course, a lot of other integrated area development plans have taken place, many of them. Some which were done by NID in those days, but many others. And most recently, just last week, I came to realize what a huge amount of planning of cultural areas has now is taking place in this country under a whole variety of authorities. INTAC did a lot of this work. A lot of this now has been done by architectural firms all over the country doing these integrated areas. All of them face this issue. How do we actually implement the recommendations that we make? And there again, there's a management task which really has not been addressed or recognized. Now, one of the points that Secretary Culture has made, and in his letter from which this conclave has started, is the government underlining the urgent need for arts management. So I do hope that in the next couple of days we can define that need perhaps with a little more precision than we've been able to do so far. The background paper that Vijay has prepared is an excellent step in that direction. But who needs to understand this need? and then how does this need to be expressed? All of us come here with different backgrounds. We probably are carrying different perceptions, different experiences in our minds. But are there at least 2 or 3 catalytic spaces in the country where our concern can actually be expressed through a managed effort to bring together both the sensitivity that one requires in dealing with matters of culture and art, as well as the expertise that is required to do 3 things: to plan, to organize resources towards the objectives of our plan, and then to control our progress towards those objectives, which is basically what management is all about. There's one other aspect I think we should remember in this. The paper that Vijay has given us to read sets out the background in terms not only of the Indian experience, but of other experience nearby that we can draw. But I'd like to add one other thing to this. As you know, the last few years have gone in trying to achieve what is known as the Millennium Development Goals, which is up 2015. Following 2015, now the global effort is to develop sustainable development goals. And this is a very interesting situation now, because the emphasis is moving from targets and numbers to a process called sustainability. What relevance is that for us? It's hugely relevant. One, that when the Millennium Development Goals were established by the global community, culture was not recognized up front. It came through the back door through interventions of UNESCO and others to indicate that for each of these goals for human survival on this planet, which the MDGs were supposed to represent, there was a cultural component which needed to be understood if those goals were to be achieved. Now this was one major step forward. Simultaneously, you've had since the almost 20 years the Human Development Indicators system, which the United Nations now uses and is globally used to understand progress. That, to my mind, is critically important for us to understand in this exercise if India is to make a demonstration to the world about what this all means. Because the Human Development Indicators move away from judging progress in terms of GDP and per capita statistics to understand the concept of well-being. This is a huge movement that has taken place. And we, in the so-called world of art and culture, have not taken advantage of this. But it's our agenda. If you look at the HDI reports that come out at the end of each year from the UNDP, you will see almost a charter for what we're discussing here. That well-being is about issues that cannot be statistically reduced to charts, but are critically important. I face in 2 areas where I work, and I'll tell you one of them, which is the craft sector, the second largest industry in India after agriculture, with absolutely no management framework of any kind in this country, not even basic data. The second largest industry in this country has no data. We don't know how many artisans there are in this country. The official estimate is 13 million. We believe it's closer to 200 million, and that, some people tell us, is an underestimate. In the Economic Census 2012, for the first time, this country is counting its artisans. Now, without that basic data of the largest cultural industry in this country, which is craft, how do you manage the future of art and culture? Because this sector, like all the sectors we represent here, requires investment. It requires developing human resources. Where is that money going to come from if there's no case and if there's no data? So it's taken us 3 years just to get to this point, that please count the number of people who are contributing to the country's economy. And the need for this approach, this management approach in the area of crafts, has only now been recognized. And yet, India was the first country in the developing world to put crafts at the center of planning in 1951. And 60 years later, because we are that like that only, we still don't have the basic data. So I'm just saying it's very important for us not only to understand how important to our survival as a nation this issue of managing art and culture is, but also the need to make our case in terms that other people in other sectors understand what we're actually talking about. This has been a very major struggle for those of us, and some of us are here in this room, who have been part of this effort to get the government of India and other stakeholders to understand the importance of just one part of what we're talking about, which is the craft sector. And one of the reasons for that is we've taken this sector, as I think we all do in this country, we've taken it for granted. We've assumed that the crafts would always be with us. We assumed that from Gandhiji to Kamladevi Chattopadhyay to Popul Jayakar, everything. And then in the 21st century we discover that there is a view held by the highest authorities in New Delhi that the craft sector and this cultural business is nonsense. It has nothing to do with the 21st century. And the case really had to be made from scratch. So I would suggest that we take this opportunity very, very seriously. The Secretary has pointed out the urgent need for this. Is that a felt need? It is a real need, but is it a felt need? Who needs to understand that need? How do we communicate that need to the broader community of which we are a part? Where do we start with this communication struggle? And then, how do we demonstrate, one or two critical examples what we mean? Could it be, for example, one or two museums that we pick up as showcasing what we require? One or two locations? I'm not quite sure what is needed. Certainly those of us who work in the craft sector would be only too happy to share this experience with you and take it forward. But we need those catalytic demonstrations, and I hope in the next couple of days we can find out where those demonstrations could take place. Thank you.